Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on episode 3 of Own the Road with AutoTrader, where we make car stuff simple for Canadians. My name is Jodi, and I'm the editor-in-chief of AutoTrader.
I'm AutoTrader's road test editor, Dan Alika.
And this episode is all about car camping and outdoorsy stuff, but you may have noticed that we are a week late to air this episode. I blame Dan.
Literally, it is my fault. Kind of. Okay. I will give you guys a backstory here. A couple weeks ago, I was on a first drive program, a media drive program, for the new Nissan Z, which the review is out there on YouTube and on autotrader.ca/editorial. So I was down there for this media drive event. They're really starting to kind of ramp up again now that we're, getting to this point where the pandemic is, I don't want to say normalized, but it's, we're starting to figure out how to live with it. And I was down in Las Vegas for this program, and I got COVID.
Boom.
And that meant I was stuck down there for 10 days.
And it's so ironic to me because Dan is like one of the most careful people I know in regards to like COVID and stuff. And so it's really crazy to me that you ended up getting it.
It was not fun. And, realistically, like, I obviously like knew the risk. You knew it as well. It was like, part of the risk, but it's like, hey, the industry is pivoting back to the way it was when we were doing these first drive events. And so it was, in the back of my mind, and I was still, wearing my mask and everything like that. And I woke up on the third day and wasn't feeling well, and I took a test, and that was it. So first of all, I say this as, sort of a cautionary tale. I know the whole thing is, making car stuff simple for Canadians, but we could also make travel simple for Canadians, because I want to kind of just put it out there that it's like, if you're planning to travel, I'm not here to ward you off of it, but have a contingency plan in place. I was lucky because I was on this Nissan program, and Nissan, had this plan in place and, had checks and balances to make sure if anyone got it. And, Pam Baker from MCI Group Canada, which is like a meeting and travel company that Nissan uses, she was like my guardian angel. Like, without her, taking care of the logistics, like, it was just one less stress for me to worry about. I was already like, pretty scared, and also like just the unknown of what was going on. So Pam really, took care of everything. She got me set up with accommodations. She made sure that everything was rebooked for my flight to come home. But my thing is, like, chances are the average traveler is not going to have that.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because the testing requirements are so hard to understand, right?
Yeah, because,
and so technically Dan could have flown home, but he decided to do the right thing.
Well, it was actually two parts. One, I did the right thing because I woke up and I had symptoms, and I was like, oh no. But the other side of it is I was supposed to go back to the States
the next day,
and so I needed a test, because as of right now, you need a test to enter the States. You don't need one to re-enter Canada. So that gets to your point, whereas like technically I didn't need it, but I would have tested anyways, because I woke up and was like, oh no, something's not right. And then on top of that, I needed it because I was supposed to fly back the next day. So, I think like morally, it felt good. I didn't get on a plane,
and spread it around
because back when I was on the Chevy Silverado ZR2 program, there was this lady in the security line behind me that like very obviously had something wrong with her that seemed an awful lot like COVID, to the point that like people around her were like, ma'am,
Ew.
like, this is not appropriate. And finally, like, security came and took her out of the line, and we're like, you can't do it. But because the responsibility falls on all of us, I think the right thing to do is to make sure that, you test, and if you're not feeling well, take the test. But like I said, just make sure, now that it's, getting into the summertime and you might be thinking about traveling down to the States, just know that you could be shacked up for 10 days without any
Yeah.
chance to
so
come
just
home.
to have a plan in
Yeah.
case things go wrong,
Yeah.
some extra money budgeted aside for hotels and food, and like maybe pack some extra like underwear because Dan ran out of underwear.
I did. I had no socks and stuff. I had to like get some because when I go on these trips, they're usually only a few days, and so I live out of a carry-on because it's easy and it's nimble, and right away I was like, man, I'm in trouble now.
Yeah, so just a cautionary tale to have a plan
That's
B,
all it
plan
is.
ahead.
Yeah.
It's never fun to get sick, but it's still very much a reality that it could happen. And like Dan
Yeah.
called me in the morning, and he sounded fine, but he was like, "Oh, I tested positive." He called me back literally like an hour or two later, and you sounded wrecked.
Oh,
Like,
it was bad.
It escalated real quick.
Yeah, so that was the crazy thing for me too, was like the speed at which it progressed, where it was like I was fine the night before, and then the next morning, woke up, my alarm went off at 6, and it was like boom, and then whatever at like 9 o'clock when I talked to you the second time, it was like, oh, Jodi,
Yeah,
Jodi,
I think I gotta
really
stay here.
sick here. So.
But yeah, I'm glad you're back, Dan.
Thank you. I'm happy to be back.
He's tested negative, so we can be in the same room
Yeah,
together.
it's been a couple weeks.
Yeah, but speaking of the pandemic, because it is still very much a real thing that is happening, this like huge phenomenon happened where it really forced a lot of Canadians to like reconnect with the outdoors.
Yeah.
Any outdoor activity, camping, like ATVing, kayaking, really exploded over the last 2 years because of those travel restrictions. We weren't
Yeah.
able to go anywhere, so we really got into the idea of
Well,
exploring.
we, not you.
Okay, so full disclosure, this episode is on car camping and outdoorsy stuff. I don't like the outdoors at all. Like, I've been camping twice and I hated both times.
It's fair. I also this was honestly a happy coincidence. I did not plan this, but the shoes I'm wearing, I know you guys listening on your favorite podcast provider can't see them, but those of you watching this on YouTube, you can see these are RV themed Nike SBs.
Really?
Yeah, and I put them on this morning not thinking, hey, we're
Wow.
doing this whole camping thing, but they're like modeled after like 70s or 80s like Winnebagos.
Okay, I could kind of see that.
Yeah. So anyways, that's just a happy coincidence.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
But also the timing kind of works because the long weekend is coming,
Yeah.
which is the unofficial start to Canadian
Yeah.
camping season.
Yeah. Technically, it's like a lot of places, provincial sites usually open like in early May, but yeah, really this is like the unofficial start because the weather's just nice enough where, you're probably going to be okay.
So this is why I hate camping so much. The last time I went camping, it was over the May long weekend, and it snowed.
Yeah, it
And
can
so
be
I was
pretty
like, I'm
miserable.
done. I'm not doing this again.
Yeah, when I used to live in northern Alberta, it was like that. That's what everybody told me when I lived there. I'm like, this weather's pretty ruthless, and they're like, we make it to, May long weekend without snow, that's it, we're done for the year. I'm like, okay, cool. And it didn't snow the May long weekend, and I was like, perfect. And then the June 1st that year, I was at work, and I walked out of the newsroom, and it was snowing, and it stayed all weekend, and I was like, guys, this is not
That's
fair.
depressing
Yeah.
as heck.
But good camping out there.
Beautiful out there.
Man, it is lovely.
So yeah, we're going to be talking a lot about outdoors thingies. Dan's going to take the lead on this because I just called it outdoor thingies because I know
yeah.
nothing about this.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have a guest later on to
Yeah.
tell us all about overlanding and what it is and how it's different from car camping. Dan does camping a lot, so he's going to have a lot of really great tips for you. And again, if you like our podcast or webcast, please subscribe. And
Yeah.
if you enjoyed it, rate it.
Rate it, leave a comment. I'm
Yep.
sure you can do that. Let us know what you like. You can also email us at expert@trader.ca.
That's correct. Dan
Yeah.
never remembers our
literally,
email.
it's the same as like, my email address just being like my first name and last name @Trader. But then every time I go to say it on the podcast, I'm always like, am I about to mess it up?
Yep.
So, but
And you usually do, but at least this time he
I
got it. It's
Okay.
expert
at
trader.ca if you have any questions. We also have a lot of Ask an Expert questions to address in this episode. We got a
Yeah.
lot of great submissions. But yeah, let's get right into it. So
Totally.
car camping.
Yep.
Dan goes car camping a lot.
Yeah.
Maybe you can share with our audience the basics of car camping, kind of the pros and cons.
Yeah. Well, I define it as literally like camping in or with your car, right? I mean, there's the idea that car camping is just using your car to get to a campsite, but I refer to it more as like, are you, sleeping? Are you integrating your car into your plans?
Right.
If so, that's what I classify as
Instead
car
of
camping.
like parking somewhere and like hiking
Or
to
just
your
like
campsite?
even if it's at a campsite and you park the car and then you set up your tent and everything. But if you're actually camping, out of your car, that's what I refer to as car camping, which I've been doing for years. And not like my friend Kyle, who literally just like, folds the driver's seat back and like passes out.
That's where he sleeps?
Yeah, he's weird.
There's no tent?
No, he brings a tent. He brings a sleeping bag. He like, is all ready to be this big like outdoorsman. And then he's like, well, I'm going to go, sit in the car and turn the air conditioning on. And then you look over like an hour later and he's snoring in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
I've messed with him. He slept in there once and I took his spare key. And then while he was sleeping, I kept hitting the panic button. And the alarm kept going off. And then the next morning, we were all like, Kyle, what was going on? And he's like, I kept rolling over on my keys. And then while he was like telling us, I hit it again. And he was like, and then he figured out. And then the really funny thing is, well, I guess not that funny for him, is that he, got mad and took the spare key from me. And then accidentally locked both keys in the car. So on the Sunday when we went to leave, he couldn't get into his brand new car.
Oh
it was
my
literally
God.
2 months old. And he had to break into it by like, he bent the door frame so that we could get a stick in.
This is all your fault.
No, it's his fault. He shouldn't have slept in the car. This is what car camping done right and not the wrong way, not the Kyle way. Okay?
Wow.
Yeah. A lot to unpack there, I know.
There's a lot going on in that story.
Yeah.
I guess one of the lessons we can learn here is if you bring a spare key, don't put them both in the same spot.
Yes. He put them like in the trunk. One was in like his jacket pocket and one of them was the one that he took from me all grumpy and he like threw it into the trunk and then closed it. And that was like, 2 days before the fateful, realization that he was locked out. But if you car camp properly, i.e. using a tent that, you fix to the back of like your wagon or your hatchback, you wouldn't have to worry about locking yourself out. But what you do have to worry about is potentially draining your battery. Ask me how I know.
How do you know this, Dan?
So I was camping with my girlfriend and we had the tent set up on the back. But the problem is I usually advocate just disconnect your battery. Okay, if you're camping, if it's more than just one night, even if it's just one night, but especially if it's an older battery, just disconnect it. Because the dome light, every time you open the door, it triggers, the ECU because it thinks you're about to start the vehicle, right? So it starts to wake up all the computers.
Is there a safe, easy way to do it for people who don't know?
To disconnect the battery?
Yeah.
Yeah, literally just like take a wrench, and disconnect the negative terminal, disconnect the positive terminal, make sure they don't touch, just push them off to the side, and then close the hood and you're good to go.
Cool.
And it's super easy and it's just like that, pain-free way because, yeah, we woke up, we were camping. It was like a beautiful weekend. We had a blast and then we were getting ready to go and the car wouldn't start and I tried my booster pack, but it was like dead enough that it didn't work, and luckily this guy offered to give me a boost. But that's why I always say keep a booster pack as well as booster cables, because sometimes you get to that point where you might not be able to jump it with one of those booster packs. But the other thing to do, and what I've done since, is if you camp or tailgate a lot, invest in a deep cycle battery, right? So like, mine is an Optima yellow top, and they're just like, they're great for cold starts. They're great for, Jodi and I, we drive these different press cars every week, so our cars sit for a week at a time. So it just gives you that cold cranking amperage to get it started again. But it also means if you do camp with it and you're opening the doors or you're listening to music, it's going to last longer than
Right.
your average battery.
And then you don't have to worry about disconnecting it.
Yeah, I still do just
Okay.
to play it safe, but you know, realistically,
Okay.
you wouldn't have to worry
So
about it.
tip number 1, deep cycle battery.
Deep cycle battery
Tip
is a
number
huge one.
2, make sure you invest in a booster, but also make sure it's charged fully before you
Yes,
head out.
and have booster cables as well, just in case. But disconnect the battery.
Okay, cool. What other tips do you have for a successful car camping trip? And keep in mind that, like, most people, I know you, when you camp, you do it very fancy.
Yeah, remember I told you my friends call me the Sultan because it's like I have
Yeah.
a carpet outside of my tent because I don't want to get dirt inside and whatever. But my thing is this: if you have, you know, an SUV or a wagon of some sort, you don't have to. Rooftop tents are super cool, but they're also very expensive. There is a company called Napier, and they have these different types of tents. That one of them is like this awning style tent that basically just extends off of your open tailgate so that you can sleep in the back of it and, you know, climb out, and it's got a fly and everything like that. And I've had one for years, and it's an amazing, and it's super cheap. I think it's like maybe $130 brand new.
Cool.
And then there are bigger ones, and Napier also makes one that kind of incorporates a standard tent, like a 6-person tent, but then it also zips to connect with the back of your vehicle.
Cool.
So that you can use both. So let's say, you know, whatever, like the couple, you know, mom and dad can sleep on the ground and the kids can sleep in the back of the car so
Okay.
that they can still kind of interact, and they're off the ground.
Okay.
And there's also tents that you can get that go into the beds of trucks. So there's lots of cool options that are more affordable, especially if it's your first foray into camping. You don't want to sleep on the ground, which I'm, you know.
Can I ask a question? Because I don't
absolutely.
know.
Yeah.
What is the benefit of sleeping in your car versus on the ground?
Comfort mainly.
So you
Just
don't have
being-
like sticks and stuff?
Well, just like the ground is hard no matter what.
Yeah.
You know, air mattresses kind of suck. And I'm, again, that bougie side of me. Like, I have a cot, like an oversized cot so when I'm not sleeping in my car, I have inside of my tent so that I'm elevated off the ground, and it's a little more,
Wow.
and I'm like 6'3", so I bought this like massive one, and my tent is also big enough for me to stand up inside of.
Cool.
Which is handy. It's always, the experience is what you make of it, and also how, you know, kind of prepared you are. If you go out with like a tiny tent and a thin sleeping bag and not enough food and not enough beer, you're probably going to have a somewhat miserable experience.
Okay. So how do you deal with bears when you're car camping? And is it different from regular camping?
No, that is something that I've said before, and I did write this story that you can go on autotrader.ca/editorial, and I did like I think it was 5 tips to go camping with your car. So if you search, you know, car camping on AutoTrader, you'll find this story. That is a problem because usually when you go camping, it's like set up your tent, keep the food in the car overnight so that animals can't
can
get
lock
to it.
it.
Exactly. Well, obviously that becomes a bit of an issue if you're sleeping in the back. My solution is just get a couple smaller coolers. They'll stay colder longer because, you know, it's not this big space. And B, then you can stack them up on your front seats.
And still lock the door?
And that way you can sleep in the back.
Right.
And then, you know, the coolers are on the front seats. And that way they're out of the way.
Cool.
No bears are going to get to them. Also, string food up in the trees is something that people have been doing for years.
Really? So they go to
You've
the
never
trees?
seen people do that? Garbage
don't
up in the
camp.
tree? Like, oh yeah, true. Well, anyways, it is a strategy.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, the smaller coolers on the front seat is a good one if you're going to sleep in your car. And I just find it's nice, especially like, you know, someone in your shoes, right? Where it's like camping's not really your thing, whatever. It's kind of like a nice, comfortable way to do it. You can buy air mattresses that are kind of like shaped specifically to go in the back of a vehicle.
Cool.
Our friend Paul Reed, shout out, he used to bring, it's pretty smart, a futon mattress.
Oh, and just like fold
And
it
just
up or
that,
something?
because it would kind of like work around the
Yeah.
This was in his golf wagon, which he sadly got rid of foolishly. Probably regrets it. Bought a Tacoma instead. With these gas prices?
Yeah,
Oh.
that's...
But anyways, Paul, silly old Paul, he puts this futon mattress in the back.
That sounds cozy.
Yeah, and it's nice and comfortable. I have an air mattress set up, and it's pretty good. I don't really I can sleep in my golf wagon by myself. With my girlfriend, it's not so good. When I had my Outback, more than enough room for two.
So I always thought one of the benefits of car camping is that you can use your car as a power source. So like you can plug stuff into it.
But again, you got to be mindful of the battery. Right? That's my only thing is like I'm of the mind that it's like I don't run it unless I have to, and I'd rather get set up and just kind of leave it. So I'll bring a couple little like battery packs because I'll use my phone to listen to music. This would be a good time to plug that Ford F-150 gas hybrid and Lightning electric with the onboard inverter.
Yeah.
Which a lot of vehicles have inverters now, and it is handy.
But this is like one of the most powerful ones available.
Oh, it's like
you can run a fridge off it if you wanted to.
Yeah, you can run your trailer off of it. Like if you were, so let's say you're camping and you've got the hybrid. I think that one I think is like a 7.2 kilowatt inverter. The F-150 Lightning, which is the all-electric one that's just coming to market, that one has like a 9.7, don't quote me on the numbers, but I think it's 9.7 kilowatt inverter. And that means if you're driving to a campground and if you've got your trailer hooked up to the back, you can plug it in directly to like the NEMA locking connector in the back and keep your fridge running so you can have your food and your beer loaded up in the fridge. That's a big theme of camping for me is
beer.
Yeah. So you can keep it all loaded up. But then last year, you thought it was kind of fun. My buddies and I, when we went camping, we hooked a projector up and watched movies over the bay where we camped. It was like, I'm going to go out on a limb. I would call it a magical experience.
It does sound pretty magical.
It was pretty nice.
See, that sounds really fun. Even though I don't like camping, that experience to me sounds like, I could do that.
Yeah, it was cool.
But this actually really leads really well into our next topic, which is like features that drivers should look for if they're kind of an outdoorsy driver. So we're not saying like if you're an off-roader, but if you are looking for a daily driver and you happen to do things that are really outdoorsy, like camping, maybe you kayak or mountain bike or something like that, there's certain features that will really help during those experiences. And one of them is those onboard generators.
Totally.
Another thing you should look for is like body cladding, plastic body cladding around the wheels.
For multiple reasons, right? It's like A, let's say you're on a narrow trail, but B, the big one for me is if you want to bring your bikes or your kayak or whatever, you can lean it against the car and you're not going to worry about damaging the paint. It's very nice. And, back in the day, like the Honda Element, that's actually what the cladding was designed for. And it is a very handy feature because, if you're taking a bike off the roof and you're by yourself and there's not like a tree around for you to lean it against, it'd be nice to just kind of like drop it down. You can place it down in that way that you can kind of reposition and not like be like, what am I supposed to do with this thing? Yeah,
so plastic body cladding is great. And one cool thing, because of this whole like this like drive towards outdoorsiness that happened during the pandemic, is that a lot of automakers started offering very outdoorsy themed cars right from the factory.
Yeah.
So you can get something like a Toyota RAV4 TRD Pro or
Trail,
like
TRD, it's
Trail.
The Trail. It's like the RAV4 Trail TRD.
It's a weird name, but like the Mazda CX-50 is doing it, like the Subaru Forester and Outback Wilderness versions.
Even the regular Forester and Outback. I used to work at Subaru. I used to own an Outback, and those things they've got the ground clearance, they've got the cladding. You can and that is the Outback was a great camping vehicle. And my friends Carrie and Allie, they're avid campers. And so Carrie and I were talking, and he's always been a Subaru fan. And, we were talking last year, and he was looking to upgrade. And so he went and checked out the Outback, and they love it. They have 2 dogs, and they just got like an awning to attach to the side.
Cool.
So like when they have the roof rails and the crossbars, extended, they can hook this awning onto it, and that way it gives you some shade when you're camping. So even whether you're sleeping in the car or in a tent, it's just nice to have some, extra shelter.
Yeah, that's
Um,
fantastic.
and they're like, they're slowly building that thing up. But the cool thing is, it's still their daily driver. It's still like, they went to see our friend Eddie out east, drove from Ontario, and it was like comfortable and perfect. So it's not like this big rugged off-roader,
Yeah.
but it can get them places that the average vehicle just can't go.
And it's way more efficient than driving something that's like purely focused on off-roading as
Yeah.
well. And it's more manageable in the day-to-day life, which is really
Yeah.
cool. But yeah, going back to that power generator, a lot of vehicles these days come with like a 3-prong household
Yeah,
plug,
that's
which is a
the
killer
inverter.
feature.
It's just usually those are like somewhere in the kind of 600 watt range. So to give you an idea, like the smallest inverter that you can get with the gas powered F-150 is 2700 watts. It's 2.7 kilowatts. So it's like quite a bit more. And the interesting thing that even I didn't know, something I learned camping, was I had that truck. So I was like, well, rather than wasting time in the morning, like boiling water on the fire or whatever for coffee, I'll just bring an electric kettle,
And just plug it right in.
plug it into the truck.
Yeah.
That thing took so much, and I didn't really think about it. Those heater coils in the kettles, it was like, I think it was something like, I don't quote me on it, but I think it was like 1800 watts it was drawing. So it was almost at peak capacity of that gas
For a
powered
kettle.
for a kettle.
That's interesting. I was
Yeah.
thinking it would be useful for like an air compressor, like for your bike tires or something
Yeah,
like
or
that.
your air mattress
Yeah.
or whatever. It is nice to have, and it is a very common feature, like SUVs, minivans. It's more common, and electric cars nowadays are having that. They call it vehicle to load. I think it's kind of funny that there's like this term that's been coined, and it's vehicle to load. When to your point, like the whole idea of an inverter, which is basically what that is,
Yeah.
has existed for decades.
Yeah, I think the difference is that for electric cars, for some reason, it's only like a modern thing.
Yeah, and they want to I think sell it as a feature. So it's
Yeah.
like calling it, and in fairness too, it can also usually it's a little bit more capable than the average inverter. Like I said, if they're
Right.
usually 600 watts, an electric vehicle can do more than
More,
that.
yeah.
But the Kia EV6, you can buy, so it has like the top trim, I think it has the vehicle to load outlet under the back seat. But it also, you can buy this adapter that plugs into the exterior, like
The charge
port that turns into like reverse charging, so you can plug stuff in
That's
outside
super
the car.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I
like
love
that.
that feature. And
Yeah.
I imagine people really getting into using that, especially if they take it during like car camping and stuff.
Yeah.
Another feature that you should look for if you're an outdoorsy driver, is rubber mats.
Yeah.
Like for the trunk, for like a rubber cargo mat, or
Yeah.
even on the inside where your
Yeah.
passengers are, because you can take them out, get them dirty, hose them off. It's super easy, very rugged.
And that's what going back to what you said about, automakers like building these kind of, right from the factory, like adventure ready vehicles, is, going back to like the Subaru Outback. There's a few different, trims, and one of them that was like discontinued to replace it with the Wilderness, which is a little more, rugged and outdoorsy. But I think it was called the Outdoor, and it has this upholstery that's like kind of like a neoprene type upholstery, so that it's like easy to wipe down if you get it dirty. And I really like that level of thoughtfulness.
That's really nice.
Leather's good for that too. If you're, again, like if you're kind of an outdoorsy person and you think you're going to track dirt and stuff in, it's much easier to clean leather than it
cloth.
is cloth.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Roof racks is another big one, or roof
Huge.
rails will be huge if you're an outdoorsy driver, because it makes it easier for you to put stuff on top, like a cargo box, or if you wanted one of those rooftop tents.
Yeah, and really that's something that you gotta, you've got to look for the right, equipment for the job. So if you want to do a rooftop tent, make sure the vehicle that you're shopping for has the static load capacity to handle that kind of weight, right? Because you got to think the equipment and people, that's going to add like if you have two people sleeping on a rooftop tent, you're looking at a few £100 with all the stuff. And so, it's good to make sure that the car you're looking for has the static load limit that will allow you to sleep up there.
Perfect. Yeah, that's something that I wouldn't have thought of. So thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, but also keep in mind dynamic load and static load are different. So like the roof rack can't carry as much. Like let's say it's rated for 450 pounds. You can't drive with 450 pounds on the roof.
Right.
Right.
But if it's parked, you can hold that much.
But if it's parked, the static load limit. Yeah.
Perfect. Obviously, all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive is one that I like to mention.
Yeah, like that's one of those ones that I would not call it a necessity, but it is nice to have.
Just in case your trails are like a bit sketchier.
Exactly, because we've all been there. We've all been in situations where like, oh man, that extra traction would have come in handy.
Yeah.
But it's not. I wouldn't say it's like explicitly necessary. Like my Golf is front-wheel drive. And
for most situations, I think it is completely fine, and you've never gotten stuck camping with your Golf.
No, but if you're leaning more towards like the overlanding end of things, then four-wheel traction is all but a must, which might be a good transition.
Okay, let's do it.
Bring in our guest this week.
Yes, let's do it now. Today we have a special guest joining us because our episode is all about the outdoors and car camping.
Wait, should this week be Own the Trail instead of Own the Road?
That's a good question. I like your suggestion.
Perhaps.
We'll have to Photoshop something up here.
We'll work on it. But
I'd like to welcome Christian Walsh to Own the Road. He is the creator of a really cool organization called OverlandNTH. So thank you so much for joining us today, Christian.
Thank you for having me. It's great to see you.
So if you can explain to our listeners briefly, like what is overlanding and how is it different from car camping?
Sure. Yeah, it's an interesting thing because now in today's automotive accessory market specifically, and the manufacturers are getting involved too, overlanding is just really well equipped car camping, right? So you're going to see vehicles that have things like kitchens in them or a means for, dealing with human waste. And you'll see there's a lot of vehicles these days driving around with rooftop tents on them, for example, which is a really comfortable way to sleep while you're on a trip. So to us, overlanding is really just very well equipped car camping and the means to sort of maybe spend a little bit longer on the road so that you can be comfortable. And I mean, I want to bring my wife and my kids with me as well. So we have to have amenities with us, which make that possible.
Yeah, it's like that whole idea that the adventure itself is what you're doing. It's not getting to a destination and staying there. It's about like the actual trip of getting to that destination, then turning around and coming home.
Exactly. Yeah. We say the journey is the most important part. The destinations, there are many along the way. So, the vehicles become a tool for us to get where we need to go. But in between A and B, there's all kinds of different things to see along the way, which often end up being the best part of the trip.
Okay, well, this is Own the Road / Own the Trail this week, so we got to ask you, what's your vehicle that you own? What's your overlanding rig?
That's an interesting question. So I'm on my fourth iteration of a build, if you will.
Okay.
Cool.
So I'm currently building up a very unique vehicle. I have a regular cab short box Toyota Tundra.
Nice.
And then we've put a cap on the back of it with some awnings that sort of stretch around so we can really get a comfortable campsite situation. And I'll tell you, at our last OverlandNTH gathering in September, we had a lot of rain. And those that were prepared for the rain had a very comfortable and relaxed weekend. And those that weren't were really getting some tips and tricks from the people that were, right? So
yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, so the new truck is it's only a 2-seater, fair enough. So it's a solo rig or for two people, but we do have also a really a very simple and Spartan third gen Toyota 4Runner as well. I'm a Toyota fanboy, self-proclaimed. But yeah, my wife has a 4Runner as well. So we often travel together in two vehicles with our kids and the dog.
Nice.
That's cool.
I was obviously overlanding has been a thing for decades really, but it's I think like in the last kind of 10 years or so is when it's really taken off. And back in I think it was 2016 or 2017, I was at the Overland Expo down in Arizona. And man, the stuff I saw down there was like drool worthy. Like,
Right.
it was amazing. And I think, and that was kind of why we wanted to do this, because, it's such a great opportunity for people to get out and explore with, like you said, as a family or with friends. And with the pandemic hitting, like, what a great, kind of push to get out there and explore.
For sure. And the reason Overland North exists is because we don't have Overland Expo here in Canada. So back in January of 2020, I dreamed up this idea of doing something where we could get the community together and meet some like-minded people, and get some ideas from this guy about how he built out his vehicle, and it just didn't exist. So we started a Facebook group, and then of course March of 2020 came along, which changed everything drastically.
Totally,
But
yeah.
we were pretty stalwart. We had our first event in September of 2020 outdoors. So it was a very safe and well thought out gathering of people. And the first year we had, 50 amazing rigs show up with all the people that accompanied that. And then last year it doubled in size. And now this June coming up, between the 3rd and the 5th, we're going to again probably double the number of vehicles that are on site. So there's lots of ways to see how other people have done this thing. And now we have lifelong friends from these gatherings as well.
Totally. Why don't you go ahead and plug the Facebook page and the site for people if they want to check it out?
Sure, yeah. So we're Overland North, spelled NTH.ca is the website. A really active and engaged group of people on the Facebook group, Overland North. And then, of course, the Instagram handle is at Overland North as well, which will link you to the page too. So, there's over 1,500 members now on the Overland
Wow.
North Facebook group, which is awesome because, for example, the other day, someone was looking for an item that they couldn't find, and within 10 minutes 8 people had directed them to maybe a local supplier or had a used part or whatever the thing is. So
That's really cool. I think
yeah.
that like community aspect of Overland North is really cool. So I first became aware of Overland North when I was test driving a Ford Bronco. It was the 2-door, and it gets a lot of attention. It was bright yellow. But I went to the grocery store with it, which is not what it's meant to do, but I did it. And someone from Overland North had put a sticker with a little note on the back saying like, "Cool rig, let's get in touch." And I thought that was such a nice gesture, really welcoming gesture for someone who knows nothing or very little about overlanding. And then I became aware of your group, and I was learning a lot of really interesting things. And I learned that a lot of people have some misconceptions about overlanding. So maybe you could talk to us about like what are some of those misconceptions that you would just love to demystify?
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's probably the best question there is because I mean, we can poke holes in the myth of overlanding. You don't need a rooftop tent. And you don't need $100,000 like fully kitted Defender. We had a guy show up last year in a lowered Mazda 3, and he had just as much fun as anybody else. It's about the journey, and the camaraderie is the biggest thing for me. I miss that from my days of playing rugby and all the people that we got together all the time. It's more about the people than anything, and now we're being intentional. I mean, at the gathering, for example, there's a whole program for kids. There's going to be, I would think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 or 60 kids camping with us for the
That's
weekend.
awesome, man.
So, and it's everything from, sleeping in a hammock to a ground tent to, there's folks that have fully outfitted vans with solar systems and kitchens. And it's really, there's no barrier to entry. You could get in a Toyota Corolla and do a lot of the stuff that we do. It's not, I know you mentioned earlier the own the trail thing. A lot of the trips we do, we don't even leave the gravel, because it's really, we want to check out this waterfall or we want to check out this cool restaurant. So it's to deal with some of the misconceptions. I think it's fair to say that you don't need all the stuff. I think the best thing you can do right off the hop is just fill up the tank and go somewhere. And then from then it becomes the next thing, right?
Totally.
Yeah, that's super fun. And you also mentioned that you travel with your kids and your dog. Can you share some tips with us and our listeners on how to make that trip a little bit easier?
For sure. Well, first thing is snacks. Snacks are Very important.
Not even just for kids, for me, I need
Yeah,
snacks.
Yeah.
that's the most important thing in my life in general.
But you'll find, like, I think one of the best ways to make things way more comfortable is a simple 12-volt fridge that you can just plug into a 12-volt port in any car. You can have cold drinks and food with you that are accessible while you're on the road. The dog, our dog does not travel well. It's a frustration for us. So we have a comfortable spot for her in the back of my wife's 4Runner. And when we get to camp, though, it's a really simple and quick setup. I mean, a lot of the new tents, they're not really expensive, but when you get there, you can just sort of spring them open and then you're done, and then all of a sudden we're camping. Look for some firewood. And I actually wrote a song about that thing in particular. The firewood is sometimes the biggest struggle. But when it comes to the kids, I mean, modern vehicles are comfortable. The air conditioners work great. The heaters work great. It doesn't need to be super fancy, but and in today's day and age too, we find that cell reception is usually really good in most places, unless you get too far away. So the boys want to play Roblox or something. You know what? Just let them play them.
Yeah,
They're gonna look for the scenery occasionally as well, but some of those amenities do make things a little bit easier.
I gotta say too, I mean, as someone who does some four-wheeling, does some camping, I think Jodi and I have talked on previous episodes that the whole point of this is our slogan, whatever, is making car stuff simple for Canadians, and we talk a lot about the kind of like insular car communities where it's like a little bit, I don't want to say like standoffish, but it's a little bit like, oh, you're an outsider. And one thing I got to say, and I think like for a lot of people listening and watching out there who are maybe thinking about dabbling in overlanding or camping for the first time, is I find like of all the groups of, automotive enthusiasts, if you want to group, kind of group it all in, like off-roaders and overlanders are some of the most selfless, most
Yeah.
generous, most like caring people that when you encounter them on the trail or at a campground or whatever, it's always like, how can we help? Or do you need something? You always leave with something that you didn't have when you got there, whether it's an item, whether it's food, or whether it's like a piece of knowledge. And I
Yeah.
think like a group like yours is such a great opportunity for people who are just getting started to
Mhm.
kind of build that camaraderie and build their knowledge base and know that they're not doing it alone.
That's right. Yeah. And that's why we offer a day pass to the event. You don't have to come and camp for the whole thing. Just come check things out on a Saturday. And I'll share a quick story with you. At our fall gathering last year, there was a new Canadian. His name is Victor. He joined the trail run and he got stuck. And the Overland North community got him out of the stuck situation that he was in on the trail. And he was so kind at the end of the gathering in September last year. He said this is the most welcome he felt since he came to Canada, because everyone
That's
was just
awesome.
so
So
nice to him.
nice.
Yeah.
That made us feel good, because like it doesn't matter who you are. Please
Yeah.
come and join. We're not vehicle phobic. You can have one of these or one of those. It makes no difference. So yeah, I mean, I think you're right. The off-road and overland culture is very much inclusive and welcoming to
Yeah,
everyone.
totally, man.
Yeah.
It's so great, and I think that helps a lot, right? Because like I look at going to the racetrack for the first time, it can be very intimidating, and it often feels like you might be afraid to ask a question or you don't
Right.
want to do something stupid. Those same fears exist out on the trail, and they should for good reason because
Mhm.
it can get dangerous, right? You shouldn't go out alone, but it's nice to be part of a community, even if you're not actually traveling with those specific people. It's like no person left behind. If you encounter someone on the trail, you guys are going to do whatever you can to get them pointed in the right direction, get them unstuck, whatever it
Yeah.
takes. And I think that's so great. And like I said, especially as the pandemic has kind of pushed people to get out and explore, their backyards, it's nice to know that you guys are like those kind of ambassadors for overlanding and for the trail and for, Canada and Canadians.
For sure. Ambassador is the best word. And this is why we do a recovery clinic during the gathering. So you can learn how to use a tow strap or a winch. The guys from the Toyota Enthusiast Club as well are going to be doing a clinic on the tread lightly principle. So what we have a problem with to a certain extent is over usage of trails. So we don't
Totally.
want to use them too early in the spring as they're thawing out, but we're also leaving it as we found it. So not leaving garbage around and picking up after others, those sorts of things too. So we're very intentional about the messaging there, which is we have this amazing resource in Ontario, lots of crown land to explore, but let's do it in the right way as well.
Yeah, for sure. Last year I went out a couple times with the Central Ontario Off-Road Jeep Club, and those guys are, so knowledgeable, and
Mm.
every single one of them, we were shooting a video review as part of the days, and you know, every time I looked, it's like, well, I was like climbing over an obstacle, somebody was like picking up beer cans
Yep.
and keeping, and I'm like, it's so great to see that spirit exist no matter what, and it's not just when other people are watching, it's like
Yeah.
you're doing the right thing, and my buddies and I are like that. We like exclusively camp on crown land, and every time we show up, it's like, hey, somebody's been here before, and I get it, bush parties and whatever, but it's like, well, I'm not going to leave that garbage there because A, it ruins it for the next person, and especially if it's their first experience, and
Mm-hmm.
B, it's a quick way, for the M&R or whoever in the local municipality that you're in to say, this is shut down. We're not going to let people camp here anymore.
And
So
that
I
does
think,
happen. Yeah. I
yeah,
mean,
absolutely.
with the amount of increase in domestic tourism due to COVID, people just couldn't travel. The impact and the pressure on some of these areas is higher than it's ever been. So, I used to be a canoe tripper and an outdoor education teacher. In my heart is leave no trace camping, right?
Yeah,
So like this is what we're trying to spread that as much as possible. And not to shame people that don't understand it. It's more of an educational thing.
yeah,
For
Listen,
sure.
absolutely.
we all have to work together to keep these trails open. And the guys from the Ontario Federation of Four Wheel Drive Clubs do a really good job of
Yeah.
lobbying to keep the trails open. We need to support them as much as possible. But at Overland North specifically, I think you'll find anywhere that our people go, you wouldn't even notice they were there rather other than see some tire tracks. We're keeping it as sustainable as possible.
That's perfect. That's just what we like to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Christian, was there anything else you wanted to add before we end our call today?
Well, we just love to see more of you. So please join the Facebook group Overland North. We'd love to see you at the gathering coming up on June 3rd through 5th at Albion Hills Conservation Area, which is a beautiful place to host an event like that. And then we do have an event coming up in September as well that's more of a rally style event. So we'll be doing much more driving and less camping, which could be fun. So we'd love to see you guys at one of the gatherings.
Totally, man. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Christian. We really appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for your time, folks.
Thanks. Have a good
Cheers.
one.
Bye-bye.
So yeah, overlanding sounds really fun. I didn't know a lot of those things.
Super cool. And really, I do think it's great, people like Christian and Overland North, like just those resources you're going to find if this is something that you're interested in. They are like the most welcoming, easygoing, helpful people. I don't know what it is about, that lifestyle, but it's just like it brings out the nicest qualities in people.
Yeah.
So
I especially like what he said about like taking care of the environment,
yeah, that's a
but
huge
also
one.
enjoying it at the
Yeah.
same time.
So if you're thinking about doing it, they're a good resource, and just in general, getting out into the outdoors, you're going to encounter a lot of people that are like-minded, and it's really great.
Yeah, even me, I know nothing about it. He answered all of my questions without judgment or anything.
Yeah.
So, and that's the kind of vibe that overlanders and off-roaders are all about.
Always, it's funny. Like when the Central Ontario Off-Road Jeep Club guys that I went four-wheeling with last summer with the Rubicon 4xe and the Bronco, they always joke about it, right? Because it's like they're a Jeep club, but it's like they don't turn away any off-roader. Doesn't matter if they're in a Toyota, a Ford, whatever. It's like they're going to offer a helping hand, and especially because like people often think that they can do this stuff alone. And I even see people that are just like underprepared, right? So it's like when you're four-wheeling, one of the biggest, mistakes I see out there is people don't air down their tires.
Okay.
And that is like something that it's such a difference maker, because it widens your footprint literally, but it also means when you're going over rocks or whatever, that the tire can kind of like articulate around the obstacle.
Right.
And I see a lot. My buddy sent a video to the group chat the other day. It was a brand new Ford Bronco, and this guy was going up this obstacle and didn't air down his tires, and you could watch, and he kind of like went nose up in the air, and then his tires like bounced off the rocks because they were fully inflated, and he flipped backwards and rode off this Bronco.
And it was brand new.
Brand new.
Oh my God.
And that's one of those, I'm not saying, you know, I guarantee you that if he aired down that he could have avoided that.
I mean, the angle and whatever, yeah.
But that's be
scary.
Such a difference maker. And I see it quite often, is that people just, you know, don't air down. And it is such a crucial element of off-roading. So
we should make this another episode.
A full
Let's do a
off-roading?
full episode on the
Done.
basics of off-roading, because
Done.
I learned a lot
Yeah.
last year because I went off-roading a couple times.
Didn't you have a little
I got real stuck. Like
who's-
really
was that,
stuck.
Was that on you, or did someone else get you into that
I
mess?
blame someone else.
Do you want to
One
name
of
that
our
someone
contributors, Jeff Wilson, really put us in a sticky situation, but I will go over that story in a future episode so I could roast him some more about all the stuff we did wrong during that excursion.
Maybe we'll have him on as a guest, and he can, you know, he can
Yeah.
go over it and sort of, you know.
I would love that, so I could roast him in front of all of our people.
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
perfect. That actually leads us to our Ask an Expert question. So again, if you have any questions about anything, you can email us at expert@trader.ca.
That's the right email address.
Yes, just
Take
tattoo
it-
it on yourself so
take it
you'll
from me.
remember. And we actually got this question through our Facebook page. I don't remember who the original poster was.
Okay.
But he wanted to know, could you please let me know which SUV is good for camping and can sleep 3 inside, so 2 adults and 1 kid? And so I know that I don't know anything about camping. However, my advice would be, if you, depending on how often you're camping, like if you're only going once or twice a year, I would consider getting like a regular sized vehicle and then renting an RV during those camping trips.
And, like, sleeping 3 in a vehicle is very tough.
Yeah.
Even something huge like a Suburban or even a minivan, you have to think, right? Even if it's like unless it's, you know, whatever, like an infant, a toddler, whatever, that they can just kind of fit in between, that would be a tight fit, and I wouldn't recommend it. And at that point, I would just say, hey, get a big tent. And the other thing about tenting is, like, if you're like, oh, there's 3 of us, don't get like a 4-person tent. Get a 6 or an 8.
Really?
Totally. And yeah, okay, I'm a big guy, but it's like the space is always a little bit idealistic, what's listed on the label. So if you want a little bit more room to stretch out, and like I said, it's like, you know, and like Christian said, tents these days are, you know, they're easy to set up. Like,
I like the ones you can just go boom and they explode open.
yeah, mine is it's not quite that easy, but it's pretty easy. And like I said, I can stand up inside of it, which is very impressive and very handy, because I hate that feeling of, you know, being slouched over.
Yeah, or like crawling everywhere.
Yeah, so, you know, it's nice to be able to have all that space, but totally, if you're, you know, there is a kind of line that you have to draw. So when I use that tent and I'm by myself and it's like early in the season or late in the season, some pretty chilly nights, you know, because it's like there's no one else. If I'm with my buddies and it's just me sleeping in that tent, it's like, you know, there's no kind of radiant heat from everyone.
There's no one to cuddle up to, is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly, because Kyle's sleeping in his car, you know.
Yeah, that's a great tip. So
Yeah.
thank you. We hope that kind of answered your question
Yeah,
in a
I'm sorry it's
roundabout
not
way.
exactly what you wanted to hear, but I just really don't think there's like a 3-person.
The advice that I always give is, like, don't buy a car for what you think you might do. Buy a car for what you actually do. And
Yeah.
in those rare instances where you need to like camp or tow, just rent a vehicle
Are you
during those
listening,
times.
truck owners?
That's another episode. Our next episode is about trucks, so we can talk about that then. So we got another question about solid state batteries from Joseph in Toronto.
Okay, what's Joseph's question?
He says, I watched a video about SSD batteries, so solid state batteries, which seem pretty cool, and I wanted to know if they've been already implemented in electric cars, or will they be, and what are the pros and cons? So great question.
Joseph sounds like a pretty thoughtful guy.
Very smart guy.
Yeah.
This takes a bit of unpacking because there's a lot of information to go through here. So
Yeah.
let's see if we can do this. So, like, current batteries use a liquid as a means for energy to travel through.
Yeah, like a, lithium polymer,
Lithium ion.
like, yeah.
And that's why when you see batteries, they're like,
And all the cells, they're
Yeah.
like these individual cells.
and they're big, right?
Yeah.
And so solid state batteries don't use liquid. They use like a solid material like glass or ceramic for the energy to travel through.
Yeah.
Some of the pros and cons right now, solid state batteries are still in a very early stage of development.
Yeah.
They're only being used right now in stuff like pacemakers.
Yeah, it's really tiny.
Like very tiny
Yeah.
implementations of this technology, right? Some wearable stuff have SSD batteries. And so the amount of research and development you would need to expand that to be able to run a car or even a cell phone is quite a bit off, right?
But Nissan is, I think, is behind a push into
Yes.
the R&D side.
Nissan, Toyota, I think a lot of automakers and a lot of like tech companies
Yeah.
are looking into solid state batteries. And so Nissan is actually hoping to implement their first solid state batteries into an electric vehicle in 2028.
I think, and this is something that we kind of touched on in our last 2 episodes because it was, demystifying EVs and intro to greener driving, is that I think that projection gives a little bit of context into kind of like, this is a long game. Even
Yeah.
though EVs have been around, for the better part of the last, 20 years in, like full scale production, they're still in their infancy and the technology is changing so much. So the fact that, Nissan is saying, hey, this is still like our projection, our hope is 6 years from now. So it just shows you that it's like all the eggs have been in, like even lithium, like that's a newer technology.
Yeah.
So it's, we're still a ways out, but I do think the potential's there because it's the cost is what they're trying to drive down.
So
right?
like right now, lithium ion batteries and mining and all of that stuff needed to get those materials is very expensive, which is why EVs are typically a lot more expensive than regular gas-powered cars. Some of the pros of solid-state batteries would be like, they take up less space, which is the biggest one. They're less heavy, which will mean more range because it's less weight for an EV to carry around. Higher energy density. So besides being smaller, they can hold more energy in less space. And so that's a really good one. So it's lighter. It's less sensitive to temperature changes. So right now, EVs lose a lot of range in the winter because lithium-ion batteries, they're really sensitive to high and low temperatures.
Yeah, they kind of gel up, right?
Yeah.
It's like the chemistry slows down in a lithium-ion battery in the cold weather. So it's like this would eliminate that problem.
Exactly, which means more range for EVs, which is great. SSDs are also less flammable. And they would enable faster charging times, which is another one of those stumbling blocks with EVs right now, is because like now it's at least an hour. Like if you want to charge an EV, you need at least an hour on the fastest charger.
So here's, that actually is something interesting. So my aunt is a quadriplegic. She's been in a wheelchair, for all of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have an accessible van. And my aunt and my uncle, like, they're very interested in electrification, but those vans, how they work is they lower the floor.
Right.
Well, in the current,
in an EV, that's where the batteries are.
and because they're so thick, the battery packs have to be so tall. You can't do anything to get around that right now. So maybe these solid state batteries are that avenue to these, different types of vehicles that are still so important, and maybe a little bit, it pokes a little hole or shows like a flaw in, these like government targets of like, hey, 2035, we want to sell, no new internal combustion vehicles. But it's like, well, what do people that need accessible vans like that, what are they going to do?
Exactly. So I think this new technology will help enable so many more like creative packaging and designs of EVs, and it'll really open it up to be like literally more accessible to all types of different drivers, which is great. And so going back to the cost, so Nissan says that right now, most automakers are paying $132 per kilowatt hour for a vehicle battery right now,
Okay.
which is why they're so expensive.
Yeah.
With solid state batteries, they're hoping to get that cost down to $65 per kilowatt hour.
So like essentially half.
Yeah,
you
and
know.
and once those batteries become mainstream and like we figure out the manufacturing, that will bring down the cost of
Yeah.
EVs dramatically.
That's always the thing, right? I get the sticker shock, but they're expensive to make, and that's just the reality of it. And we get a lot of weird comments about that, right? And it's like, what do you like? That gas powered cars were like that when they first came out, and people were still, doing the horse and buggy thing while well-to-do people were able to afford cars.
Yeah.
That's kind of where we're at right now. We're at that like early stage of,
It's going to be expensive. Yeah.
Yeah.
You kind of have to pay to be an early adopter, right? Like
Yeah.
it's like, when the new iPhone comes out, it's so much money, but you got lineups out the door for it because you want to be one of those first people.
Yeah.
And we know it's not accessible to everyone, but at some point it will be,
Yeah.
And Nissan is saying that once they figure out how to do the solid state batteries, it will bring the cost of an EV to be like a regular gas powered car, which would be a game changer, I think.
And realistically, okay, let's look at it. Gas prices being what they are today, notwithstanding, because that was a definite curveball for a lot of people, and it's going to continue to be for a while. But if that timeline makes sense, if that ends up lining up where it's like 2028, so call it 2030 just to be safe, that's still 5 years until that mandate. So if all of a sudden you're seeing prices drop, dramatically because of solid state batteries on top of, the rest of it, right? That really is, the kind of democratization of electrification.
Yeah.
You're going to see it happen kind of quickly.
Yeah, and I think at that point we'll see a lot more people willing to get into one because of those shorter charging times, less volatility with range when it comes to like temperature and stuff, and it takes away all of those pain points that we have currently. So like EVs 5 years from now are going to be like wildly cool.
Totally. And
so excited.
And I hate to like be that browbeater of it, but it's like if you don't you're sitting there still saying like, oh, it's not for me, and I'll stick with my gas power, thank you very much. Like, I hate to break it to you, but like, no, you won't. Like, there's gonna be a point. Like, you're not in charge of that beyond a certain point. So if the sales, if that target stays true, right, and 2035 is when we see no more brand new internal combustion.
You'll have to buy used vehicles.
You'll have to buy used, which is fine for a lot of people. But eventually, you have to think like that's a phase out, because right now, let's say like I couldn't tell you what the average age of a used vehicle in Canada, but I think like there's that 20-year window is what you normally see. People drive,
if it's like a Corolla or something.
Yeah, like cars, like used cars, usually in that, couple year to 20-year-old range. So that means like once you get to the 2050s, like the goal is they're gone.
Yeah.
Aside from like people having, their collector cars.
Oh my God, 2050s.
Yeah.
That's insane. I don't want to think about that.
Well, I'm just being realistic.
No, I know it makes a lot of sense, but it's like crazy to think about that far into the future.
But I think we need to think of, and that's part of this whole thing with Nissan with these solid state batteries, and it makes you think. Going back to what I said, that the last 20 years of EV development has done a lot.
It's led us to this point.
But it's also been so minuscule with the potential that's there.
Yeah.
But it's like I said last time, I still think hydrogen was the answer, and the fact that it never took off is a big mistake.
It's a bit of a shame.
Yeah.
But we actually have two questions about EVs.
Whoa.
So we have another question from Peter, and he asks,
this is Joseph's brother. Right?
Peter says, will emergency vehicle services like CAA be able to assist owners of electric vehicles with boosts? So he's saying if you run out of range, if your battery is completely depleted, what kind of options do you have? So right now, if you have a gas-powered car and you run out of gas, they'll just bring you a can, like a jerry can of gas, and you're on your way. Yeah. And then you're on your way. With electric vehicles, it's a little bit different. So Dan has a really great demystification here.
Well, so it's tough. Like the first one is that I would call it, I would say it's in progress, because that is a reality that, we're going to have to look at. And it's like I said on that, I think it was the last episode, that Mallory had said to me about, like, in an emergency situation, like a natural disaster, how are we all going to get out of town with these electric vehicles with limited range? Well, it's the same thing here, where it's like, okay, yeah, you pushed it too far, you were on a road trip or whatever, and the charger you stopped at was broken, and then you went to the next one and that one didn't work, so you've run out of juice. Right now, no, there aren't, to my knowledge, and if there are, please reach out at, expert@trader.ca. See, I got it right that time.
You did get it right that
So
time.
if the services exist in Canada, please reach out and let me know. But to my knowledge, right now, as of today, whatever it is, May 16th, 2022, there are not these mobile services, but I know there are companies that offer these kind of like mobile generators specifically for electric vehicle charging.
Yep.
That they're trying to push out onto the market.
Yeah, and that to me makes a lot of sense. So instead of a tow truck driver coming and give you some gas, they'll have a generator you can plug into, and they'll really just give you enough power so you can get to like a real charging station.
Yeah. But that brings us to that next one where it's like the tow situation. So you can, if you were in a Tesla, there's a tow mode. So if something goes wrong or whatever, it essentially like shifts the vehicle into neutral. But bear in mind that, electric vehicles don't have transmissions, or like not a multi-speed, like, the Porsche Taycan has that 2-speed transmission to give you that,
right.
those gears to give it a little bit of a conventional acceleration off the top. But they don't have transmissions, and those electric motors are like directly connected to the wheels. So you can't tow them the way you would if your car died and you could just shift it into neutral and push it, right?
Yeah.
It can cause serious damage to those electric motors. And this is why last episode I said, like, you should never, ever, ever fully deplete. And it's the same thing with a, gas-powered vehicle. You shouldn't let the tank run dry. Stuff happens. With an electric vehicle, if you're going away for an extended, let's say you're a snowbird and you winter down in Florida, and you own an EV, have either someone that can take care of it for you or a trickle charge to keep some juice in that battery, because eventually it'll die and then you are in big trouble.
Yeah, so the interesting thing that I didn't really think about is that EVs can't be towed on a tow truck. You have to flatbed it.
Yeah, you'd have to flatbed it.
So if ever you're in an EV and you run out of power, you have to specifically ask for a flatbed tow truck.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way that you can safely get to a charger.
If a traditional one shows up, like, you can't put it on the back of that
and that's a big one to remember, because I didn't really consider that.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something that you all should know as well, because that's something that might happen, right? Crazy. Never thought about that. So again, if you have questions, please email us at expert@trader.ca. Again, anything car related is on the table.
Or
There's
not.
no silly questions.
We said before.
Dan always likes to open up the questions to
About
anything.
food.
I think he wants someone to ask him about his personal life. So if you want to do some digging.
Just like, if you want to talk food, music, anything else that we
everything's
could get
on the
into.
table.
If you have questions about that whole COVID travel experience, hit me up.
Yeah, he has lots of interesting insights on stuff like that. But yeah, we love to hear your questions. There's no silly questions.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us on episode 3 of Own the Road with
This was
AutoTrader. It's always fun, Dan. I love doing these.
Yeah, this is awesome.
So
next week's going to be good too.
So our next episode is all about trucks. Trucks. So we know Canadians love trucks. We're going to go over kind of the basics of trucks, some tips on what to look for if you're new to trucks, all that good stuff.
Making trucks simple for Canadians.
Trucks. And yeah, so don't forget to subscribe and rate our podcast if
Please
you enjoyed it.
Rate my voice too, my truck's voice, if you want.
Are we going to do the whole episode in like truck voice?
Oh, I might, now that you've brought it up.
Oh God, what am I getting myself into? Anyway.
Trucks next week. We're going to do an off-road, full off-road one.
Maybe in the summer at some point.
Yeah. And yeah, like I said earlier, make sure you check out, Christian's Facebook group there, Overland North. They've got, some great resources and great people and a couple events coming up soon. And yeah, get out there, explore, hit the open road. Lots to see in this great country of ours. And until then, we'll see you next week.
Have a great long weekend, everybody.